Hello BookTube! Welcome to Lizzie Faye Loves Books. I'm Elizabeth and it's time to do my February wrap-up. Well, for the month of February I finished 16 books. I really crammed a lot in there during the last few days. I started out the month kind of slow and I thought I've got to pick up the pace if I've got to keep up with my goals. And I also started 3 other books that now I'm undecided about whether to finish those up in March or put them on hold for longer because they're not mysteries. And as you all know, I want to read only mysteries in March. So I'm still debating about what to do with those, and I'll talk about those more at the end. I did 2 different Friday Reads videos during the month of February, and they were a little earlier in the month. And I believe I finished 10 other books since my last Friday Reads. So let me just briefly show you everything that I read, and then the ones that I did not finish until later in the month, I'll try to give you at least a couple of sentences about what I thought of those books. I'm discovering that wrap-up videos are my least favorite videos to make, but I know that it's all part of the greater book discussion. You know, we can talk about book hauls and TBRs and all of that, but unless you really talk about what you've read and what you thought of it, you're not really able to give people recommendations. But I think wrap-ups are really important for a well-rounded booktube channel. They're just not my favorite to do. So my goal going forward is to try to just make those very brief because they take me so long to edit, and I want to just keep it brief and to the point, let you know if I liked it or not, give you a couple of little things about each book, and then just let it go at that, because there are so many other booktubers that are much better at book discussions and book reviews than I am. I don't consider myself a critic by any means, and I'm not qualified to be a critic, but I can tell you what I enjoyed and what I didn't enjoy, and you can take it from there. So let me break it down a little bit for you. I mentioned that I finished 16 books, and then I had 3 books that I didn't finish, and then of the books I finished, 4 of them were 400 pages or more. In fact, one of them was over 600 pages, and 3 of those 4 were audio. I only read one of the big books in print. And then I had 2 books that were 40 pages, so 2 little bitty books. Then as far as formats go, I had 9 books that were on audio, and I had and then 7 books that I actually read. And of those 7 books, 3 of those were ebooks, and then the other 4 were physical books. Now I have physical copies of most of the audiobooks that I listen to, but the majority of the reading experience for those books were audio. Well, actually, one of those was kind of half and half, so it could go either way. But anyway, you get the point. Now, as far as age groups, 7 of the books were middle grade or children's books. And of the rest of the books, a couple of these would probably be considered YA, but 6 of them were fantasy. And within the fantasy, now my theme for February was Fantasy February, and also I wanted to throw a few romances in there. So I actually had a few of those fantasies that I would consider rom-fan, as the book Nester says, and some of those did have some romance mixed in with the fantasy. And then there were 3 others that you could classify as romance. They at least had romantic elements. 2 of them were historical, 1 was contemporary. And then I also participated in the TimeHopAthon. So at the end of this video, I'll tell you which of these books fit which challenges for the TimeHopAthon. Let's start with the middle grade books. I talked a little bit, the very first book I finished was Shiloh Christmas. I don't have a copy of it, so I'll show you a picture here. It's the 4th book in the Shiloh series by Phyllis, Reynolds, Naylor. And then I also listened to the 4th book in the Wolves of the Beyond series, which is Frost Wolf. And this is a fantasy that takes place in the same world as the Guardians of Ga'Hoole, which is a series about owls. All of these, both of the series are by Kathryn Lasky. And this is kind of a futuristic dystopian, but it's after all the humans have gone from the earth and there's only some animals left, and it's just kind of an animal fantasy. But it's very enjoyable. I learned a lot about owls from the Guardians of Ga'Hoole, and I've learned a lot about wolves from the Wolves of the Beyond. I believe the author did a lot of research in how these species work together and band together, and how they hunt, and there's just a lot of good information mixed in with these really wonderful fantasy stories. I had 1 children's book. This series was recommended to me by Akos, and she reviewed 2 other books in the Red Knit Kept Girl series on her channel, and this was the only one I could find from my county library. This is Red Knit Kept Girl and the Reading Tree. It's by Naoko Stoop, and it's just really precious. It is about a little girl and her forest friends, and they each contribute a book to this hollow tree that they found, and it eventually becomes their little library, and it's adorable. So I would definitely recommend picking this up. It's really sweet. Then the other 4 books that I read were middle grade books, and they are all Sunshine State Young Reader Award finalists, or as we call them here in Florida, our Sunshine State books. And I'm in the process of doing individual reviews for all of these books. So this month I read The Summer I Saved the World in 65 Days by Michelle Weber Hurwitz. I will give you a little hint though. I believe now, even at the beginning of March, this will be my favorite book of the entire year. It's that good, and I will tell you about it in a separate video. And I did something I never do. I went on Twitter and found this author, and I tweeted to her that I think this is going to be my favorite book of the year. It really had that big of an impact on me, so I can't wait to tell you about it. The Tapper Twins Go to War with Each Other by Geoff Rodkey. The Worst Class Trip Ever by Dave Barry, and The Luck Uglies by Paul Durham. So earlier in the month, I listened to The Whole Town's Talking by Fannie Flagg, and I read The Kiss of Deception by Mary E. Pearson, and I listened to Royal Assassins by Robin Hobb. In the last part of the month, I listened to The Sword of the Stone by T.H. White. It is my goal to read the entire Once and Future King bind-up for our library book club. I believe we are reading this one for April. So I wanted to go ahead and at least get part of it done. So I started with the first book, which is Sword of the Stone. I was a little disappointed in it. It started out great. I remember having a child's abridged version of this as a kid, and my grandmother and I reading it together. So most of those parts, like the parts I know from the Disney movie, are in the early stages, except for the very last part, which is the Sword of the Stone. But somewhere about the second half, when Wart is getting turned into these different animals, and then he has these big educational conversations with these different animals, and the animals are teaching him about history and evolution and legends and all that, I honestly got really bored, and there were times when I wanted to get this finished, but I just couldn't bring myself to pick it up because I just wasn't enjoying it. Now, I was really excited to get to the end with the actual sword and the stone, but that's such a little tiny part of the whole book. So I was really disappointed in it. Now, I'm glad that I read it. I'm looking forward to reading more of the story because I really don't know much about the whole King Arthur history and legend. So, you know, I'm definitely going to go ahead and keep reading and finish the entire Once and Future King series, but this one just wasn't what I hoped it would be. And then I guess this would also be considered a fantasy romance. This is the very last book I finished. In fact, I was listening to this on audio, and it was getting really close to midnight on the last day of February, and I knew I wasn't going to be able to finish the audio, and I wanted to count this for February. So I just sat down and I kind of skimmed / speed read through the last several chapters. I know it sounds really legalistic, but I just wanted to be able to say that I finished it before I went to bed on Tuesday. And then on Wednesday, and even I think into Thursday, I went back and I listened to it on audio a little slower so that I could really get all the details. But I wanted to be able to say that I did get to the end of this book in February, and I did. So this was fantastic. I really, really enjoyed it. Of course, you know, it's kind of like watching the first episode of Star Wars, and you know that this sweet little Anakin Skywalker is going to someday be Darth Vader, and you know, so it kind of has that feel to it. You know that there's going to be something heartbreaking in the end to make the Queen of Hearts turn into a villain. But I just really enjoyed the journey. The writing is fantastic. It just flowed so wonderfully. I just thought it was an excellent book. I also finished Where Two Ways Met by Grace Livingston Hill. I'm trying to read at least 12 of my Grace Livingston Hill books this year, and this is the first one. You could consider this historical fiction, but when it was written to be contemporary. And I believe it was written in the 1940s, and it is about a young man who has come home from the war, and I believe he's come home from World War I. And he takes a new job with a finance company and quickly realizes that the integrity of the boss is not lining up with what he's been taught. And he's sent to foreclose on some properties, and he finds out really quickly that that is not the kind of work that he wants to do. Meanwhile, the boss's daughter, who's very worldly, really wants him to pay attention to her, but he meets the pastor's daughter and finds that they have a lot more in common. So it's just an interesting story. It would be considered a Christian romance, although the romance is not the only aspect of it. It definitely has a Christian theme and a Christian message, and there's a lot of good lessons in this book as far as integrity and how to treat people and doing good and things like that. So I really did enjoy it. It was a little hard for me to get into it first because I hadn't read Grace Livingston Hill in quite a while, but once I got into the story, I just really flowed, and that was all I wanted to pick up until I got it finished because I enjoyed it so much. Grace Livingston Hill books are just like a breath of fresh air. Then I also finished June, which is the second book in this bind-up of 3 books in the Brides of the West collection by Lori Copeland. All 3 of these books are about young women who accepted ads to be a mail-order bride. And June is the youngest of 3 sisters. She goes from Missouri to Washington, I believe to Seattle. And when she gets there, the man she has pledged to marry has taken ill. And over just a couple of days after she arrives, he passes away. And so she doesn't really know what she's supposed to do. So she decides for the moment she's going to go ahead and continue in the work that he was doing, which was to build a tabernacle or a big large worship sanctuary, and he had been working with another local pastor there who had a goal to do that. And she meets some other people, makes other friends, and so the story is about her journey and what she decides to do, and will she meet someone else and stay in Seattle, or will she go back to be with her other family? You just have to read to find out. But I thought it was a really wonderful story and I enjoyed it a lot. I had 2 books that were ebooks. One of them was Miss Julia's Gift. It was just 40 or 50 pages, and it is, I believe, 14.5 in the Miss Julia series. It was just a quick little Valentine's story about Miss Julia. She's comparing husbands. If you're not familiar with the Miss Julia story, it starts out in the very early beginning of the series. Miss Julia is newly widowed, and she talks about how her husband was very controlling, and you learn a little bit about the kind of man he was through the series. Well, by this point in the series, she has been married to her second husband, Sam, for almost a year, and Sam is wonderful. He gives her gifts all the time. For any little occasion or any excuse, he gives her gifts. And he's so sweet and so wonderful. He's always there when he says he's going to be, and he's just night and day different from her first husband. So she keeps wondering when the other shoe is going to drop, because to her it still feels like Sam is still in the courting stage, and she's trying to figure out, when is he going to change and start acting like he's married? And her housekeeper keeps trying to tell her, Mr. Sam is not like Mr. Springer. And so it's just a really sweet little story about gift giving and doing things for other people. And it has a Valentine theme, so it was very appropriate to read it in February. And it was really sweet. It wasn't earth-shattering. In fact, I really think that particular storyline could have easily been woven into one of her other books, but she chose to put it out there as a little ebook that you could purchase separately. And I'm all for supporting Ann B. Ross because she's a wonderful author, and I love the Miss Julia series. So I was very happy to buy it on my Kindle, and I'm glad I read it. Then another book that I bought on my Kindle is Pauper to Pedigree. Again, I was very happy to purchase this book because it was written by my friend Angel M., who is one of my subscribers on BookTube, and we follow each other on Twitter. She comments on my videos all the time. She's just really sweet, and I had a lot of fun reading her story. In fact, I would really say that it's such a great premise. It's just wonderful, and there's so many great ideas in it, and I think it's self-published, and I really hope that at some point a big time publisher will pick up this book and really give it the editing and polishing that it could use to make it great. I mean, it's just really a fun book. The premise is so unique. It's about a dog groomer who is also a dog whisperer, or kind of a Dr. Dolittle. She can hear what the dogs are thinking, and so she does a little therapy while she's grooming them, and you get to meet all different kinds of breeds of dog. She's got a really fun business partner, and the banter back and forth is fun. Now, it gets a little juvenile at times, some of the conversations they have, it's like, oh goodness, but it's still fun. And I've definitely, in my younger days, I probably had conversations with some of my friends very similar to what these two had in their conversations. thought it was fun, and I'm totally glad I read it. It was just a really cute book, and especially if you are an animal lover, then you really ought to read the book. It's just really adorable. So I believe I've talked about all 16 books that I finished. Now, real quick, let me show you what I started, and I got to try to figure out what I'm going to do with these now. One book I started that I think I'm going to DNF for now is, it says Christmas in Lucky Harbor, but it's the bind-up of the first two in the Lucky Harbor series by Jill Shalvis. So I read the first two chapters of Simply Irresistible, and I did a try chapter tag where I talked about this already, so some of you have already heard this. But I enjoyed the first chapter. I enjoyed the premise. I thought, oh, this is going to be good. But by the second chapter, I just wasn't feeling it. The F-bomb was dropped a few times, and then by the end of the second chapter, the conversations were just getting raunchy, and it just wasn't for me. So I am not saying I'm going to give up on it completely, because I really want to give Jill Shalvis a full try. I may pick up a different series instead of this one and see if I like it anymore. But for right now, I just wasn't in the mood for this. I read, a couple of really good Christian books, and this one was such a far opposite of that I just wasn't feeling it. I just didn't want to read it right now. And I may not ever, I don't know. But for right now, I'm putting it on hold. I'm not getting rid of it. I just don't want to read it right now. But another one I started that I do want to read, I'm about 60 pages into this. This is Welcome to Harmony by Jodie Thomas. It's the first in the Harmony series. It takes place in Harmony, Texas, and I thought it was going to be a romance, and there may be some romance farther on down in the series, but it starts out about a young girl, a 16-year-old girl named Reagan, who has been in and out of foster homes. She meets a lady in a nursing home where she's working, and when this lady passes away, she decides to go to that lady's hometown and pretend to be her granddaughter, because she's talked to this woman so much and she's read her hometown newspapers and she feels like she knows all the people in the town, and she wants to go there and she just makes up a whole new identity for herself and goes to Harmony. And I love it so far. I just think it's wonderful. So I am really looking forward to reading this. I don't want to stop reading it for March Mystery Madness. I may just go ahead and keep reading it a few pages along with my other mysteries. I don't know. I'm having a hard time putting this one down because I'm enjoying it so much. And the same goes for this one. This is Dust by Hugh Howey. It's the third book in the Shiloh trilogy. You may have heard people talk about Wool. Well, there's Wool, and then the second book is Shift, which I have already read. There was not a single library in my whole county that had Dust. So I went to the library that had the first two, and I asked them, hey, would you be willing to order the third one since you already own the first two? Well, this came not too long ago, and it's a futuristic adventure story, and I went ahead and started it, and I'm not finished with it. I'm only about 20 pages in. It doesn't really count as a mystery. It's science fiction, but again, I really want to read it, but I'm willing to put it on hold, and I was about to go ahead and check it into the library, and then I noticed that the same library also ordered it on audio, and so the audio is going to be coming to me very soon too. So the temptation is probably going to be really too great to pass up. I think I really do want to go ahead and just finish this up on audio and go ahead and finish this series, because it's really a great series. I'm enjoying it a lot. So I'm probably going to go ahead and turn in the print copy so that other people can have a shot at it, because like I said, none of the libraries in my county have had this up to this point, and I'm sure there are other people like me who would like to read it. So I'm going to get this one turned in, and then when the audio comes, I probably will go ahead and listen to it during the month of March, because I appreciate them ordering it for me, and I really just want to go ahead and read it. So that was my February. Now let me quickly go over the TimeHopAthon readathon. That was hosted by Aoife from Fred Weasley Died Laughing, and some other hosts that I can't remember right now, but I will link you to Aoife's channel. The idea of the TimeHopAthon was to read books that hopped around in time. The first one was to read a classic. Well, I did read Sword in the Stone. And for the second one, I cheated a little bit. The main challenge was to read a childhood recommendation, and I think you were supposed to read a recommendation from one of the hosts. And I didn't realize that at the time. I thought you had the option of reading a book from your own childhood. And so when I made my TBR, I was talking about how I did read a children's version of this as a child that I really enjoyed. So I could count this book for that challenge as well. And then I also went as far as to say that this is a children's book that I have recommended to other people. It's not old enough for me to have read it as a kid. It's only from 2011. But it is a children's book that I do recommend. This series I think is great. So I figured between those two, I have that challenge covered. The third challenge was to read a book that was published in 2016, and I had two. I had Heartless by Marissa Meyer, and I also finished Proper Pedigree by Angel M. And number 4 was to read a dystopian or future book. Now, I said that I was going to read Dust, but I didn't finish it. But I can also count Frostwolf for this challenge because this is a future world. The Guardians of Ga'Hoole and the Wolves of the Beyond, I believe, are set on Earth many years after humans have already gone away or extinct or whatever. Because in the Guardians of Ga'Hoole, it makes references to ruins of cathedrals, and they talk about, you know, the others that have been, you know, they're long gone, and they've been able to find different artifacts that are obviously from the human world, and books and things like that. So this is set in a future time. And then the 5th one is to read a historical book. And again, I had 2 of them. I had one that was written quite a few years ago in the 1940s, Where Two Ways Met by Grace Livingston Hill. And then I read June, which is historical fiction set in the 1800s. So that's it for my February. Now, hopefully, I can watch some of your February wrap-ups because I've been busy getting March Mystery Madness up and going and just trying to work and do things around my house and read, and I haven't had time to watch very many videos, but I hope to rectify that very soon. And I've got quite a few more videos that I need to film and upload in the next few days. So that's all I have for this video. I hope you're having a great day. Read a good book, and God bless you.